Have you ever been dismissed, as if your very presence were an inconvenience? At the prestigious Apex Precision Range, the sharp crack of a flawless shot sliced through the air, followed by a wave of applause from affluent spectators clad in high-end shooting attire, their designer labels glinting under the fluorescent lights. Victor Hensley, a decorated champion at the peak of his career, lowered his custom Beretta, his chiseled face breaking into a smug grin as the target revealed yet another bullseye, a perfect circle of triumph in a world he ruled. This was his domain, a realm where wealth, influence, and skill erected an unshakable divide between the elite and the ordinary, a fortress of privilege few dared to challenge. But on this day, an unassuming woman stepped into that exclusive world, her presence so understated she seemed almost invisible, until her first shot shattered everything Victor thought he knew, a single bullet that would echo far beyond the walls of the range. At 37, Clara Bennett lingered near the entrance, her faded gray sweater and modest khakis a stark contrast to the polished elegance surrounding her. She clutched a weathered canvas bag, its frayed edges a testament to years of quiet use. Her dark brown hair pulled back into a simple braid that swayed slightly as she moved. The receptionist, a poised woman with sleek auburn hair and a practiced smile, barely glanced up, her dismissive tone cutting through the hum of the range. "Members only," she said, her eyes flicking back to her screen, as if Clara were a mere distraction in her perfectly curated day. Clara's voice was soft but steady, a quiet strength threading through her words. "I have a day pass. It was a gift." Victor, at 45, the reigning national champion with a tech empire backing his career, noticed her from across the room, his sharp blue eyes narrowing with disdain. "Looks like someone got lost on the way to a thrift store," he called out, his entourage erupting in laughter, their voices a chorus of mockery that echoed through the range. The range manager, Diana Harper, a retired sharpshooter with a keen eye for fairness, frowned but stayed silent, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Imagine yourself as Clara, standing in a place where every glance tells you you're out of your depth, the air thick with the scent of gunpowder and privilege. You've come to honor a promise, a quiet vow made to someone you loved, but now you face a choice. Quietly take your place at the range, hoping to avoid further attention, or meet Victor's taunt with a calm response, accepting his challenge to prove you belong. Which path would you choose? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's see how Clara's story unfolds. While you're here, please subscribe to the Daily Narrated Stories channel. We're on a mission to reach 1,000 subscribers soon, and your support means the world to us, bringing more stories like this to life. Clara found a spot at the far end of the beginner's range, the air heavy with the scent of polished steel and gun oil, a sharp tang that mingled with the faint musk of expensive cologne from the elite shooters nearby. The polished concrete floor beneath her feet felt cold, a stark contrast to the warmth of the late afternoon sun streaming through the tall windows, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. She set her canvas bag down with a soft thud, her fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of memory that clung to every movement, a heaviness that pressed against her chest like a physical force. With deliberate care, she unwrapped a modest Ruger pistol, its plain design a quiet rebellion against the custom firearms gleaming in the hands of the club's elite, their intricate engravings catching the light like tiny constellations. The weapon felt familiar, like an old friend, its grip worn smooth from countless hours of practice with Daniel, each groove a testament to the moments they'd shared. Victor and his friends drew closer, their polished boots clicking against the floor, a rhythmic march that seemed to mock her every step. Their curiosity was tinged with mockery, a predatory gleam in their eyes as they sized her up. $20 says she misses the target entirely. One of them snickered, his voice dripping with derision, a challenge meant to belittle her further. Victor's laugh was sharp, cutting through the hum of the range like a blade, his confidence a shield against the unease that flickered in his chest. "I'll raise it to $15,000. She's never even touched a gun before," he declared, his voice booming with a certainty that belied the tremor of doubt beneath. He swaggered over, his broad shoulders casting a shadow over Clara's station, the scent of his expensive cologne an assault on her senses, mingling with the metallic tang of gunpowder in a way that made her stomach churn. "Excuse me, miss, are you sure you're in the right place?" "This isn't a sewing club," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, each word a calculated jab meant to belittle her, to remind her of the divide between them. Clara looked up, her green eyes steady, a quiet strength shining through the storm of emotions within her, catching Victor off guard for a fleeting moment. There was a depth in her gaze, a resilience that spoke of battles fought in silence, and it unsettled him more than he'd care to admit, a crack in the armor of his arrogance. "I'm here to practice," she said quietly, her voice carrying a calm resolve that belied her plain appearance, a simple statement that hung in the air like a challenge of its own, a quiet defiance that refused to be ignored. Victor smirked, recovering quickly, though a flicker of unease lingered in his chest, a shadow of doubt that he pushed aside with practiced ease. "Practice? This is a place for real shooters. $15,000 says you can't hit the bullseye from 50 yards, he taunted, his voice a mix of mockery and challenge, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the hunt. Clara's face remained impassive, though a flicker of determination passed through her eyes, a spark that hinted at the fire beneath her quiet exterior, a fire that had been dormant for too long. "I don't have that kind of money," she replied, her tone even, as if she were discussing the weather rather than a high-stakes wager, her calm a stark contrast to the storm brewing around her. Victor's grin widened, sensing an easy victory, his confidence a mask over the unease that gnawed at him. "If you somehow make the shot, I pay. If you miss, you leave and never return. Deal?" he proposed, his voice smooth but his eyes sharp, searching for any sign of weakness. Diana approached, her brow furrowed with concern, her heels clicking softly as she moved, a quiet rhythm that seemed to echo the tension in the air. "Mr. Hensley, perhaps we should let her practice in peace," she suggested, her voice firm but cautious, aware of Victor's influence within the club, a power that could crush careers with a single phone call. Victor waved her off dismissively, his eyes never leaving Clara, his focus a predator's gaze. "Stay out of this, Diana. It's just a friendly wager," he said, his tone casual, but his words a warning, a reminder of the hierarchy that ruled this world. Clara's fingers brushed the simple silver ring on her left hand, a subtle gesture that held a world of meaning, the cool metal against her skin grounding her, a tether to Daniel's memory, to the promise she'd made. "All right," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of unshakable resolve, a quiet vow that echoed in the stillness. Victor's surprise was evident, his eyebrows shooting up before his face settled into a triumphant smile, his confidence returning like a tide. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a spectacle," he announced, his voice booming across the range, drawing the attention of every spectator, a showman playing to his audience. The crowd shifted, their murmurs growing as they turned to watch, their curiosity a palpable thing in the air. No one noticed the shift in Clara's posture, her back straightening, her shoulders easing into a relaxed stance, her feet finding perfect balance as if she'd done this 1,000 times before, a dancer stepping into a familiar routine. No one saw the expert grip, her fingers wrapping around the Ruger with a precision that spoke of years of training, each movement a testament to the lessons she'd learned. No one noticed the controlled rhythm of her breathing, each inhale and exhale a silent metronome guiding her focus, a rhythm that had once been a lifeline in the chaos of her grief. And no one knew that the ring she wore had once belonged to one of the most revered snipers in Delta Force history, a man whose legacy now lived through her, a legacy of honor, skill, and unyielding love. For years ago, Clara had stood beneath a cold March sky at Arlington National Cemetery, the sharp report of the honor guard's rifles piercing the heavy silence, a sound that seemed to echo the shattering of her heart. The folded American flag in her hands felt like a lead weight, its edges pressing into her palms as she watched her husband's casket descend into the earth, the polished wood gleaming in the dim light, a final farewell to the man she'd loved. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rain and freshly turned soil, and the gray clouds above seemed to mirror the grief that threatened to swallow her whole, a storm that had been brewing since the day she'd received the news. Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Bennett had served for 18 years, his unparalleled marksmanship earning him the nickname Spectre among his peers, a name whispered with reverence in the shadowed corners of military bases, a legend among those who knew the true cost of freedom. The official report cited a training accident, a sterile explanation that felt like a betrayal of the man she'd loved, a man who'd faced danger with a quiet courage that had always awed her. Clara knew the truth was buried in classified files she'd never see, a secret that would forever separate her from the full story of his sacrifice, a wound that would never fully heal. She could still feel the weight of his dog tags, hidden beneath her sweater, their cold metal a constant reminder of the life they'd built together, a life now reduced to memories and mementos. They'd met in Portland, Maine, at a small bookstore where Daniel was browsing military history, his broad frame filling the narrow aisle, his presence a quiet force that drew her in. Clara, then a librarian with a penchant for quiet routines, had recommended a title on the Battle of Gettysburg, her voice soft but confident, her love of history shining through. Their conversation stretched from history to shared dreams, and by the time the store closed, they'd agreed to coffee the next day, a simple decision that would change the course of her life. 9 months later, they married in a quiet ceremony at a seaside chapel, surrounded by a handful of Daniel's Delta Force comrades, their watchful eyes a testament to the bonds of brotherhood. Their presence a silent promise to protect the woman their brother loved. The ocean breeze had carried the scent of salt and wildflowers, and Clara could still hear the gulls crying overhead as they exchanged vows, promising to be each other's anchor in a world of uncertainty, a vow that would be tested in ways she could never have imagined. Life as a soldier's wife meant embracing uncertainty, a lesson Clara learned quickly, a lesson that carved itself into her heart with every goodbye. Daniel would vanish for months, his missions cloaked in secrecy, leaving her with nothing but a brief note. "I'll be back soon. I love you." The words were a lifeline, a thread of hope she clung to in the long, silent nights. When he returned, it was with scars he wouldn't discuss, both physical and emotional, and shadows in his eyes that spoke of horrors he couldn't share, a darkness that lingered in the quiet moments. "I wish I could tell you everything," he'd murmur, his rough fingers tracing her jaw as they lay in bed, the moonlight casting soft patterns across their small apartment, a sanctuary in a world of chaos. "But you're my anchor, Clara, the reason I make it back." His voice would crack on those words, and Clara would hold him tighter, her own fears swallowed in the need to be his safe harbor, a need that became her strength in the face of uncertainty. During a rare stateside stint, after a mission that left him with a fractured ankle, Daniel took Clara to a local range, a decision that would become a cornerstone of their life together. The gravel crunched under their boots as they walked, and the air was sharp with the scent of pine and gunpowder, a scent that would soon become as familiar as Daniel's touch. "I need to know you're safe when I'm gone," he'd said, his hands gentle as he adjusted her grip, his touch a steady reassurance against the weight of the gun in her hands, a weight that felt foreign but would soon become a part of her. What started as a precaution became a ritual, a way for Clara to glimpse the world Daniel inhabited, a world of precision, danger, and unyielding focus, a world she'd never fully understand but could touch through the shared rhythm of their practice. He was a patient teacher, his voice steady as he guided her through each step, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her uncertainty. "Keep your stance wide, like this," he'd say, his hands on her hips as he adjusted her position, his touch warm even through her jacket, a warmth that seeped into her bones. "Breathe in, hold, exhale halfway, then squeeze." Clara proved a prodigious student, her first bullseye drawing a rare, unguarded smile from Daniel, a smile that lit up his face in a way she'd never forget. "You're a natural," he'd said, his voice warm with pride, his eyes crinkling at the corners, a moment of lightness in a life often shadowed by worry. The praise had warmed her, a rare moment of connection that became a lifeline in the years that followed. Over the next 4 years, they practiced whenever Daniel was home, their trips to the range a sacred ritual, a space where they could be together without the weight of the world pressing down on them. He taught her the nuances, stance, breath control, sight alignment, trigger pull, each lesson a thread weaving them closer together, a bond that transcended the uncertainty of their life. "Shooting isn't about force," he'd explain, his voice steady as they stood side by side at the range, the sun dipping low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, a beauty that seemed to mirror the quiet strength of their love. "It's about mastering yourself, your body, your fear, your focus." Clara soaked in every lesson, finding a quiet solace in the rhythm of it all, the steady thud of bullets hitting the target, a heartbeat that echoed their connection. Those moments at the range became their sanctuary, a space where the world's chaos couldn't touch them, a space where they could simply be. Sometimes, Daniel's teammates joined them, their camaraderie a comforting backdrop, a reminder of the family they'd built together. "Spectre can't stop bragging about you," one of them, Ethan Carter, had told her, his grin wide as he cleaned his rifle, his hands steady with the ease of long practice. Says you're a better shot than most of the recruits he's trained. Clara had blushed, the praise a quiet validation of the bond she shared with Daniel, a bond that had become her strength in the face of uncertainty. The last time they shot together was 3 days before Daniel's final mission, a day etched into Clara's memory with painful clarity, a day that would haunt her in the quiet moments. The sky had been overcast, a chill in the air that made her shiver despite her jacket, a premonition of the loss to come. Daniel had been quieter than usual, his gaze lingering on Clara as she fired, his eyes tracing the lines of her face as if memorizing her, as if he knew this might be their last moment together. "Promise me something," he'd said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't place, his breath visible in the cold air, a ghostly reminder of the fragility of life. "Keep practicing, even if I'm not here." Clara had nodded, unaware of the weight behind his words, her heart heavy with a premonition she couldn't name, a fear that would soon become reality. After his death, the range became a place of ghosts, each echo of a gunshot a reminder of what she'd lost, a wound that refused to heal. Daniel's firearms stayed locked away, their cold metal too painful to touch, a reminder of the hands that would never hold them again. Clara moved to Seattle, taking a job as a data analyst where no one knew her past, a fresh start that felt more like exile, a life stripped of the warmth she'd once known. That is, until 2 weeks ago, when a package arrived from Ethan Carter, a day passed to the Apex Precision Range with a note. "Daniel would want you to keep your promise. For years is too long to mourn alone. Step back into the light." Now, at the Apex Precision Range, with Victor's challenge hanging in the air like a storm cloud, Clara felt a spark ignite within her, a flicker of the woman she'd been before grief carved her hollow. A woman who'd once stood beside a legend and matched him shot for shot. She lifted the Ruger, muscle memory guiding her hands, the weight of the gun a comforting anchor, a tether to the past she'd thought she'd lost. The world shrank to a pinpoint. Her, the gun, the target, the chatter of the crowd fading into a distant hum, replaced by the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat, a rhythm that echoed the lessons Daniel had taught her. She inhaled deeply, the scent of gunpowder sharp in her nose, held her breath for a moment, then exhaled halfway, her finger steady on the trigger, her focus absolute. The shot rang out, crisp and true, slicing through the silence like a thunderclap, a sound that seemed to reverberate through her very soul. The target retrieval system whirred, each mechanical click amplifying the tension, a slow drumbeat that seemed to echo the pounding in her chest, a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the man she'd loved. When the target arrived, a perfect hole sat dead center in the bullseye, a silent testament to the skill she'd buried for so long, a skill that had once been her connection to Daniel. The silence was deafening, a void where Victor and his friends grappled with what they'd witnessed, their smug expressions replaced by stunned disbelief, their confidence shattered by a single shot. Clara set the Ruger down, her face unchanged, though her heart raced with a mix of triumph and trepidation, a storm of emotion she could barely contain. Victor grabbed the target, his eyes narrowing as he examined the hole, searching for any sign of a trick, any flaw that could explain what he'd seen. "Fluke," he declared, his voice edged with unease, a tremor betraying his confidence, a crack in the facade he'd built. "Anyone can get lucky once." Diana stepped forward, her professional demeanor giving way to genuine awe, her eyes bright with admiration, a rare emotion in a world of calculated indifference. "That was extraordinary, Miss Clara Bennett," Clara supplied, her voice a quiet anchor in the storm, steady despite the storm of emotion swirling within her, a storm she'd kept buried for years. Diana offered a smile, tinged with apology for the club's initial dismissal, a gesture of respect that felt like a balm to Clara's wounded pride. "Miss Bennett, perhaps you'd like to try our advanced range. You're clearly no novice." Victor cut in before Clara could respond, his voice sharp with a desperation he couldn't quite hide, a predator sensing a threat to his dominion. "Hold on. One lucky shot doesn't make her a pro. Let's see if she can repeat it, with higher stakes," he said, his tone a mix of challenge and fear, a man clinging to the illusion of control. The crowd murmured uneasily, sensing the shift in the air, the tension coiling tighter, a storm brewing on the horizon. $75,000, Victor announced, pulling out his checkbook with a flourish, his hands steady but his eyes betraying a flicker of doubt, a crack in his armor that he couldn't hide. 3 bullseyes in a row at 75 yards. "Miss one, and you admit you cheated, then leave." Senator Margaret Ellis, a longtime club member with a reputation for fairness, placed a hand on Victor's arm, her expression cautious, her touch a quiet plea for restraint. "Victor, maybe this isn't the moment," she said, her voice low but firm, a warning he ignored. He shrugged her off, his movements sharp with irritation, his focus solely on Clara. "What's wrong?" "Afraid your trick won't hold up," he taunted, his voice a challenge, a desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative. Clara considered walking away, the weight of the crowd's eyes pressing against her like a physical force, a reminder of the anonymity she'd once craved. She'd come to honor Daniel, not to perform for a crowd, not to be a spectacle in a world that had already dismissed her. But Victor's arrogance stirred something deep within her, a fire fueled by every time she'd been underestimated, every time she'd been made to feel small, every time she'd swallowed her pain to keep going, a fire that refused to be extinguished. "I'll take your challenge," she said softly, "but if I win, the $75,000 goes to the Hero's Recovery Fund." Victor paused, his eyes narrowing as he assessed her, then nodded, a smirk playing on his lips, a predator sensing an easy kill. "Fine. You won't win anyway," he said, his voice smooth but his eyes sharp, searching for any sign of weakness, any crack he could exploit. As Clara moved to the 75-yard mark, Diana approached her, her expression a mix of concern and admiration, her voice low and urgent. "Miss Bennett, you should know Victor holds the club record at this distance. No one's beaten it in 6 years," she said, her words a warning, a reminder of the odds stacked against her. Clara nodded, her calm unshaken, though a flicker of doubt crept into her mind, a whisper of fear that she might not be enough, that she might fail Daniel's memory, a fear she pushed aside with the strength she learned from him. "Thank you, Miss Harper, but I'll manage," she said, her voice steady despite the storm within, a storm she'd faced before and would face again. Diana watched her, noting the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her unassuming frame, a strength that belied her modest appearance, a strength that spoke of battles fought and won in silence. Victor played to the crowd, his voice booming with theatrical flair, a showman reveling in the spotlight. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare to witness either the greatest fluke in shooting history or a humiliating failure. 3 bullseyes at 75 yards with a basic handgun. Impossible for an amateur," he declared, his words a challenge, a taunt meant to undermine her, to remind her of her place. Clara loaded her magazines with precision, each click of the bullets a grounding rhythm, a reminder of the countless hours she'd spent with Daniel, hours that had become her sanctuary in a world of uncertainty. His voice echoed in her mind. "When the pressure mounts, trust your training. Your body knows what your mind might forget." She closed her eyes for a moment, picturing him beside her, his steady presence a balm to her frayed nerves, his voice a whisper in her ear, guiding her through the storm. The range fell silent, every eye on Clara, the air thick with anticipation, a tension that seemed to press against her like a physical force. She took her time with the first shot, adjusting for the distance, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest, a tremor she refused to let control her. The crack of the gun echoed, followed by a perfect hit, the bullet tearing through the center of the target with surgical precision, a testament to the skill she'd honed with Daniel. Victor's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching in his cheek as he fought to maintain his composure, his confidence crumbling with each shot. The second shot came faster, Clara tweaking her stance with a subtle shift of her weight, her body moving with an instinct honed by years of practice, a dance she'd performed countless times with Daniel at her side. Another bullseye, the hole so close to the first it seemed to merge into a single mark of perfection, a testament to her skill, her focus, her love. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a ripple of awe spreading through the spectators, a wave of admiration that seemed to lift her up, a validation of everything she'd fought for. Before the third shot, she touched her ring, the silver cool against her skin, feeling Daniel's presence like a steady hand on her shoulder, his voice a whisper in her ear. "You've got this, Clara." The final shot hit dead center, the crack of the gun a triumphant note in the hushed range, a sound that seemed to echo through her very soul. Victor's face paled, his expression caught between shock and rage, his hands clenching into fists at his sides, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Diana retrieved the targets, displaying them for all to see, 3 flawless shots at a distance that would test even seasoned marksmen, a feat that spoke of a skill far beyond luck. "Congratulations, Ms. Bennett," Diana said, her voice warm with admiration, unable to hide the pride in her tone, a pride that mirrored the quiet triumph in Clara's heart. "That was phenomenal." Victor snatched the targets, his hands trembling as he examined them, searching for any flaw, any excuse to dismiss what he'd seen, his desperation a palpable thing in the air. "This can't be," he muttered, his voice low and strained, a man grasping at straws. No one just walks in and shoots like that. She must have cheated. Clara's voice was steady, cutting through his accusations like a blade through silk, a quiet strength that refused to be shaken. "We had a deal, Mr. Hensley," she said, her words a reminder of the stakes he'd tried to ignore, a challenge he couldn't escape. "A deal with a fraud?" Victor's voice rose, cracking with desperation, his composure unraveling before the crowd, his carefully constructed facade shattering like glass. "I'm not paying $75,000 for a scam." Diana stepped in, her tone firm, her presence a quiet authority in the chaos. "Mr. Hensley, Ms. Bennett's shots were witnessed by dozens, including Senator Ellis. They're legitimate," she said, her words a rebuke, a reminder of the integrity he'd forsaken. Victor turned on her, his finger inches from her face, his eyes blazing with fury, a man unhinged by the loss of control. "Stay in your lane, Diana. One call to the board, and you're done," he snapped, his voice a threat, a desperate attempt to reclaim the power he felt slipping through his fingers. Diana froze, her expression hardening, a flicker of defiance in her eyes as she held her ground, a quiet strength that mirrored Clara's own. Clara watched, her calm unshaken, though a quiet anger simmered beneath her surface, a righteous indignation at the injustice unfolding before her, an injustice she'd faced too many times before. "If you're accusing me of cheating," she said evenly, her voice a steady anchor in the storm, "perhaps we should discuss this privately." Victor misread her intent, his anger blinding him to the olive branch she offered, his desperation a wildfire that consumed all reason. "Privately? So you can dodge accountability?" "No, we settle this now," he barked, his voice rising with a desperate edge, a man clinging to the illusion of control. He turned to the crowd, his voice booming, a showman playing to his audience even as his world crumbled. "I propose a real challenge, 1 week from today, a formal competition. Me against this so-called sharpshooter. 12 stations, varying distances, club-provided equipment to ensure fairness," he declared, his words a challenge, a desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative, to prove his dominance. Clara felt the weight of what she'd stumbled into, a tidal wave of attention she'd never sought, a spotlight she'd spent years avoiding. Part of her longed to retreat, to return to her quiet life, to the safety of anonymity where grief couldn't be weaponized against her, where she could mourn in peace. But a stronger part knew she couldn't back down, not now, not when she'd come so far to honor Daniel's memory, to keep the promise she'd made under a cold March sky. "I accept," she said, her voice soft but resolute, a quiet promise to herself as much as to Victor, a vow that echoed the one she'd made to Daniel all those years ago. Same terms. If I win, $75,000 to the Heroes Recovery Fund. Victor's smile was cold, his eyes glinting with a predatory gleam, a man who saw a chance to reclaim his throne. "Deal. And when I win, you confess your trickery publicly," he said, his voice smooth but his eyes sharp, a predator sensing an opportunity. As the crowd dispersed, Diana approached Clara again, her expression a mix of admiration and concern, her voice low and urgent, as if afraid Victor might overhear. "That was either incredibly brave or incredibly reckless," she said, her words a warning, a reminder of the storm to come. "Victor doesn't handle defeat well, and his influence here is immense." Clara nodded, exhaustion seeping in as the adrenaline faded, leaving her feeling hollowed out, a shell of the woman who'd walked into the range that morning, a woman who'd thought she could simply practice and leave. "I didn't come here for trouble. I just wanted to practice," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of the day, a weight that seemed to press against her very soul. Diana studied her, curiosity and respect in her eyes, a quiet recognition of the strength that lay beneath Clara's unassuming exterior. "Yet you shoot like a master. Who are you, Clara Bennett?" she asked, her voice soft, a question that lingered in the air like a whisper. Clara gathered her things, her voice barely audible, a whisper meant more for herself than for Diana, a quiet affirmation of her purpose. Just someone keeping a promise. Unbeknownst to Clara, Victor was already on the phone, his voice low and urgent, a predator sensing a threat, a man who refused to be bested. "Find out everything about Clara Bennett, whatever it takes," he instructed his assistant, his tone betraying a tremor of fear, a crack in the facade he built. He'd recognized something in Clara's shooting, the unmistakable precision of military training, a skill no amateur could fake, and it shook him to his core, a fear that gnawed at the edges of his confidence. By nightfall, news of the showdown had swept through Seattle's elite circles, a wildfire of gossip that refused to be contained, a story that captivated the city's upper echelon. Victor sat in his waterfront penthouse, the city lights glittering like a sea of stars beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a beauty he barely noticed in his turmoil. He swirled bourbon in a crystal glass, his usual victory ritual now a means to steady his frayed nerves, the amber liquid catching the light with each turn of his wrist, a hypnotic dance that did little to quell the storm within. His girlfriend, Lauren Mitchell, scrolled through her phone, her expression tense as she monitored the growing storm online, her fingers trembling slightly as she read the comments. "They're calling her the silent sharpshooter," she said, her voice tight with worry, a worry that mirrored the unease in Victor's chest. A grainy video of her last shot is going viral, tens of thousands of views already. Victor downed his drink, the burn of the bourbon doing little to quell the unease gnawing at him, a fire that refused to be extinguished. One lucky day doesn't make her a sharpshooter. "Next week, everyone will see she's a fraud," he said, his voice hollow, more a mantra to convince himself than a statement of fact, a desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative. Lauren's voice was cautious, her eyes searching his face for a sign of the man she thought she knew, a man who seemed to be slipping away with each passing moment. "Victor, those weren't lucky shots. I've watched you compete for years. She's exceptional," she said, her words a plea, a quiet warning he refused to heed. His phone rang, the sharp sound cutting through the tension like a knife, a jarring reminder of the storm brewing outside. He answered sharply, his patience fraying, his voice a storm of its own. "What did you find?" The investigator on the other end sounded hesitant, sensing Victor's volatility, his words a careful dance around the truth. "Not much yet, Mr. Hensley." Clara Bennett, 37, data analyst at Pinnacle Analytics. Moved to Seattle from Norfolk 4 years ago. No record, no social media, nothing unusual. Victor's frustration boiled over, his voice rising with a desperate edge, a man unhinged by the unknown. "That's impossible. No one shoots like that without a history. Keep digging." He paced his living room, the city skyline a glittering backdrop to his growing unease, his polished shoes silent on the plush carpet, a silent storm brewing within him. "Who is she? Where did she learn to shoot like that?" he muttered, more to himself than to Lauren, his voice a mix of fear and frustration, a man grappling with a threat he couldn't name. Lauren set her phone down, her voice soft but firm, a plea wrapped in caution, a desperate attempt to reach the man she loved. "Victor, maybe you should let this go. Pay the charity, call it a bad day," she said, her words a lifeline, a chance to step back from the edge. He whirled on her, his intensity making her flinch, the glass in his hand trembling slightly, a physical manifestation of the storm within. "This isn't about the money, it's about my legacy," he snapped, his voice raw with a fear he couldn't name, a fear that threatened to consume him. Across town, Clara sat at her small dining table, the dim glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across the room, a quiet sanctuary in a world of chaos. She stared at her phone, its screen dark, though Ethan Carter had called 4 times since she left the range, his persistence a reminder of the community she'd left behind. The military shooting community was tight-knit, and word traveled fast, a network of whispers that carried her story farther than she'd ever intended, a story she'd never meant to tell. Clara made chamomile tea, the steam rising in soft curls as she stepped onto her balcony, the cool night air a balm against the day's chaos, a quiet reprieve from the storm within. The city lights shimmered below, a tapestry of life that felt both distant and overwhelming, a world she'd never meant to step into. The day's events replayed in her mind, a mix of regret and liberation swirling in her chest like a storm she could no longer ignore. She'd never sought the spotlight, never wanted to be the center of attention, yet something within her had awakened, a dormant strength she hadn't felt since Daniel's death, a fire that refused to be extinguished, a fire that had once been her lifeline. Her phone buzzed with an unknown number, the sound jarring in the quiet night, a reminder of the world she couldn't escape. She answered cautiously, her voice a whisper against the hum of the city, a quiet plea for peace. "Miss Bennett, this is Diana Harper from Apex Precision," the voice said, urgent and hushed, a warning that cut through the night. Clara's grip tightened on her mug, the warmth seeping into her palms a small comfort in the face of the storm to come. "What can I do for you?" Diana's voice was urgent, a hushed warning that carried across the line, a lifeline in the darkness. "I shouldn't be calling, but Victor's digging into your past. He's convinced you cheated." Clara closed her eyes, a wave of disappointment washing over her, mingling with the exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin, a weight she could no longer ignore. "Thank you for the heads up, Miss Harper. I have nothing to hide," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within, a turmoil that threatened to overwhelm her. Diana's tone dropped, her words a quiet plea, a warning she couldn't ignore. I don't know your story, but Victor's family has deep ties in this city. If he feels threatened, he can make life difficult, she said, her voice a whisper, a reminder of the storm to come. Clara appreciated the warning, but years as a military spouse had taught her to distinguish real danger from intimidation, to stand firm in the face of adversity, a lesson that had become her strength. I'll be careful, she promised, but I'll honor our agreement, her words a vow, a quiet promise to herself as much as to Diana, a promise she'd keep no matter the cost. After the call, Clara opened a carved wooden box, its surface worn smooth by time, revealing Daniel's medals, their wedding photo, and a small logbook, each item a piece of the life they'd shared. She traced his handwriting, the ink faded, but the words as vivid as ever. Clara, 50 yards, 8/10 bullseyes. A natural, better than most operatives I've trained. The sight of his writing brought a lump to her throat, a bittersweet reminder of the man who'd believed in her when she doubted herself, a man whose love had become her strength. The next morning, Clara called in sick for the first time in years, the words feeling foreign on her tongue as she spoke to her supervisor, a quiet rebellion against the life she'd built in Seattle. Instead of heading to the office, she drove to a public range outside the city, far from Apex Precision's elite clientele, the road stretching out before her like a path to redemption, a chance to reclaim the woman she'd once been. The range was nestled in a quiet valley, surrounded by towering pines that whispered in the wind, their scent mingling with the faint tang of gunpowder, a scent that brought back memories of Daniel with a painful clarity. For 9 hours, she practiced with a focus that bordered on reverence, each shot a whispered conversation with Daniel's memory, a connection that transcended the boundary between life and death. The scent of gunpowder, the cold metal in her hands, the rhythmic thud of bullets hitting the target, it all brought him back, if only for a moment she clung to with all her heart. She could almost hear his voice, steady and encouraging, guiding her through each shot, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of her grief, a storm that had shaped her into the woman she was today. That evening, a text from Diana arrived, the words glowing on her screen like a warning flare, a reminder of the storm to come. Victor requested rule changes for the competition, 12 firearms, varying distances. Board approved. Clara understood the tactic. Victor was leveraging his extensive experience to tilt the odds, to reclaim the control he felt slipping through his fingers, a desperate attempt to ensure his victory. She replied simply, "Thank you. No changes needed on my end." But as she set her phone down, a flicker of doubt crept in, a whisper of fear that she might not be enough, that she might fail Daniel's memory in front of a crowd that already doubted her, a fear that threatened to undermine the strength she'd fought so hard to reclaim. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the promise she'd made, the fire within her burning brighter with each passing moment, a fire that refused to be extinguished. In his penthouse, Victor smirked at the update, his confidence a fragile mask over the unease that gnawed at him, a storm he couldn't ignore. "Perfect," he told Lauren, his voice smooth but his eyes betraying a flicker of doubt, a crack in the facade he'd built. 12 stations, 12 firearms, she can't possibly match my expertise. Lauren set her wine glass down, the crystal catching the light as she met his gaze, her voice tentative but firm, a plea wrapped in caution. "And if she does?" she asked, her words a quiet warning, a reminder of the storm to come. Victor's smile was icy, a predator baring its teeth, a man who refused to be bested. "She won't. But just in case, I've ensured a little advantage," he said, his words a dark promise, a reminder of the lengths he'd go to protect his legacy, a legacy that had become his prison. The day before the competition, Ethan Carter showed up at Clara's door, his rugged face etched with concern, his military bearing a comforting presence in the chaos of her life, a reminder of the family she'd left behind. "You couldn't pick up a phone?" he asked, his voice gruff but his eyes soft with worry, a worry that mirrored the storm within her. Clara let him in, a wave of relief washing over her at the sight of a familiar face, a tether to the life she'd shared with Daniel. "I've been busy," she said, gesturing to the shooting manuals scattered across her table, their pages worn from hours of study, a testament to her determination. Ethan nodded, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on her, his eyes searching for the woman he'd known, the woman who'd once been a part of their family. "So I've heard. The whole community's buzzing about you and Hensley," he said, his voice thick with pride and concern, a mix of emotions that mirrored her own. They sat at her table, the weight of the moment settling between them like a tangible thing, a shared grief that needed no words. "Daniel would be proud," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, a rare vulnerability in a man hardened by war. Not just of your shooting, but of you stepping back into the world. Clara's throat tightened, tears pricking her eyes as the weight of his words settled over her, a weight that threatened to break her. "I didn't plan this, Ethan. It just happened," she said, her voice breaking slightly, the vulnerability she'd kept buried rising to the surface, a vulnerability she could no longer hide. He nodded, understanding in his gaze, a shared grief that needed no words, a bond forged in loss. "The best fights often do. But they're what we need to heal," he said, his voice steady, a lifeline in the storm of her emotions, a reminder of the strength she'd found in their shared loss. He reached across, his calloused hand squeezing hers, a gesture of solidarity that grounded her, a warmth that pushed back the cold grip of fear. "You're not alone tomorrow. I've called in some friends to be in the audience." As he stood to leave, he turned back, his expression serious, his voice a quiet warning. "One more thing. Watch your back with Hensley. Men like him don't lose well, especially with his wealth and connections. Daniel would want you to stay sharp." Clara nodded, gratitude swelling in her chest, a warmth that pushed back the cold grip of fear, a warmth that reminded her of the family she'd thought she'd lost. Victor's investigation into Clara had morphed into an obsession, a desperate need to reclaim the control he felt slipping away, a storm that threatened to consume him. The initial background check revealed nothing. No competitive history, no red flags, a blank slate that only fueled his paranoia, a mystery he couldn't solve. "Focus on Norfolk," he told his investigator, his voice sharp with impatience, a man unhinged by the unknown. "She lived there before Seattle. Check ranges, instructors, anything. And that ring she keeps touching, find out about her husband." The investigator hesitated, sensing the storm brewing in Victor's tone, his words a careful dance around the truth. "I'll try, Mr. Hensley, but records in Virginia." Victor cut him off, his voice rising with a desperate edge, a man grasping at straws. "I don't care what it takes. The competition is tomorrow. I need answers now." He stood before a glass case displaying his Olympic silver medal, the memory of that victory now tainted by the pressure to maintain his dominance, the weight of his legacy pressing down on him like a physical force, a weight he could no longer bear. Late that night, the breakthrough came, a revelation that sent a chill through Victor's veins, a truth he couldn't ignore. Norfolk was the key, the investigator reported, his voice steady but cautious, a man delivering news he knew would change everything. "Clara Bennett is the widow of Chief Warrant Officer Daniel Bennett, Delta Force, killed in action 4 years ago. Elite sniper, known as Spectre. He trained her personally, called her a natural." Victor's blood ran cold, his hand tightening around the phone, his heart racing with a mix of fear and awe. "A Delta Force sniper. You're sure?" he asked, his voice trembling, a man facing a truth he couldn't deny. The investigator continued, his words a quiet storm. "Certain. Spectre was legendary for his precision. Held unofficial records in the special ops community." Victor hung up, the realization hitting him like a tidal wave, a wave of fear and awe that threatened to drown him, a truth that shattered the narrative he built. Clara wasn't a fluke. She was the protege of a military legend, a woman carrying a legacy he could never hope to match, a legacy that threatened everything he built. Clara, unaware of Victor's discovery, prepared methodically, her focus a shield against the doubt that threatened to creep in, a shield forged in the fire of her love for Daniel. On Friday evening, Diana called again, her voice a hushed warning across the line, a lifeline in the darkness. "Ms. Bennett, another update. Victor's changed the scoring system. The final station, 30% of the total score, uses a custom Barrett M82, a long-range rifle Victor's mastered," she said, her words a warning, a reminder of the odds stacked against her. Clara nodded, recognizing the manipulation, the way Victor was stacking the deck against her, a desperate attempt to ensure his victory. "So the final station plays to his strengths," she said, her voice steady despite the flicker of fear in her chest, a fear she refused to let control her. Diana's silence confirmed it, her hesitation a quiet apology, a reminder of the storm to come. "It's one of only a few in civilian hands on the West Coast." Clara had extensive handgun training from Daniel, but long-range rifles were less familiar, a gap in her skills that Victor was clearly exploiting, a gap she'd have to overcome. She drove to a specialized range the next morning, the road winding through dense forest, the air thick with the scent of pine and earth, a quiet sanctuary in a world of chaos. A man with a military bearing waited beside a black SUV, his posture a testament to years of service, his presence a quiet reminder of the family she'd left behind. Mrs. Bennett? Commander Ryan Foster, former Delta. I served with Daniel in Kandahar, he said, his voice steady, his eyes sharp with recognition, a recognition that brought a lump to her throat. Clara shook his hand, searching her memory, a faint flicker of unease in her chest, a reminder of the life she'd left behind. I don't recall Daniel mentioning you, she said, her voice cautious but polite, her heart racing with a mix of hope and fear. We weren't in the same unit, Ryan said, his expression neutral, his voice a quiet reassurance. But we all knew Spectre's reputation. He nodded toward the range, his movements precise, a soldier's grace in every step. Heard you could use help with the Barrett M82. I've got experience with it. For 5 hours, Ryan coached her, his instructions precise, his voice a steady guide through the intricacies of the high-powered rifle, a guide that reminded her of Daniel's patient teaching. Daniel taught you well with pistols, he said as she landed a series of tight shots, the recoil jarring her shoulder but her aim true, a testament to the skill she'd honed with Daniel. You've got his calm under pressure. This is just an extension, trust your instincts. By late afternoon, Clara was hitting targets at distances she'd once thought impossible, her confidence growing with each shot, a quiet triumph that pushed back the doubt, a triumph that echoed the strength Daniel had seen in her. Ryan handed her a small notebook, its pages worn but the handwriting unmistakable, a piece of Daniel she could hold in her hands. Daniel's wind and distance formulas. They'll help tomorrow, he said, his voice soft with reverence, a reverence that mirrored her own. Clara took it, her fingers trembling slightly, the weight of Daniel's legacy a tangible thing in her hands, a weight that grounded her. Why help me, Commander? You don't know me, she asked, her voice thick with emotion, a question that carried the weight of her grief. Ryan's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through his stoic facade, a vulnerability that spoke of shared loss. When we lose a brother, we protect what he loved. Daniel spoke of you, your skill, your strength. He said you had the steadiest hands he'd ever seen, he said, his voice a quiet tribute to the man they'd both lost, a tribute that brought tears to her eyes. As Ryan left, Clara felt the weight of her journey shift, a profound realization settling over her, a realization that this was bigger than her, bigger than Victor, bigger than the competition. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was a clash of values, Victor's privilege against the quiet honor Daniel had embodied, a battle between hollow pride and true resilience, a battle she couldn't afford to lose. That evening, Victor received final confirmation of Clara's connection to Spectre, each detail, Daniel's service, his death, his legacy, eroding Victor's confidence like waves against a crumbling shore, a truth he couldn't ignore. He poured another drink, the bourbon a bitter comfort, ignoring Lauren's worried glance, his focus a storm of its own. It changes nothing, he said, his voice hollow, a lie he couldn't quite believe, a desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative. Experience beats nostalgia. Lauren's voice was firm, her eyes pleading, a desperate attempt to reach the man she loved. Victor, cancel this. Pay the charity. This is spiraling, she said, her words a lifeline, a chance to step back from the edge. He slammed his glass down, the sound sharp in the quiet room, a physical manifestation of the storm within. And admit I'm scared of her? Never, he snapped, his voice raw with a fear he couldn't name, a fear that threatened to consume him. He made a call, his voice low and menacing, a predator ensuring his prey wouldn't escape. Everything set for tomorrow? After hanging up, he turned to Lauren, his smile cold, a predator's grin that sent a chill down her spine. Just ensuring fairness, darling, he said, his words a dark promise, a reminder of the lengths he'd go to protect his legacy, a legacy that had become his prison. Competition day at Apex Precision was electric, the event open to the public, transforming a private duel into a spectacle that buzzed with energy, a storm that couldn't be contained. Diana noted irregularities in the equipment, subtle adjustments to favor Victor, a silent betrayal of the sport's integrity, a betrayal that cut deeper than any loss. She warned Clara privately, her voice low and urgent, a hushed warning in the chaos of the day. The gear's been tampered with, not enough to flag officially, but enough to give Victor an edge, she said, her eyes flashing with frustration, a frustration that mirrored Clara's own. Clara nodded, her expression calm but her mind racing, a storm of its own. Thank you, Diana, she said, her voice steady, a quiet resolve settling over her, a resolve that had become her strength. Victor arrived, his entourage in tow, his logoed gear a stark contrast to Clara's simple attire, a visual reminder of the divide between them, a divide he intended to maintain. Miss Bennett, "I hope you're ready," he said, his tone laced with menace, his eyes glinting with a predator's hunger, a hunger for victory at any cost. "The spotlight can be daunting for amateurs. You can still back out." Clara met his gaze, unflinching, her green eyes a storm of quiet defiance, a defiance that refused to be broken. "I'll manage, Mr. Hensley. My husband taught me how to handle pressure," she said, her voice a quiet challenge, a reminder of the legacy she carried, a legacy that Victor could never understand. The arena buzzed with energy, digital scoreboards glowing as range masters officiated, their presence a silent promise of fairness, a promise that felt hollow in the face of Victor's manipulations. Clara spotted Ethan and other military figures in the crowd, their presence a quiet support, a reminder that she wasn't alone, a reminder of the family she'd thought she'd lost. Victor's performance was polished, his shots precise, each crack of the gun a testament to years of competition experience, a testament to the privilege that had shaped him. Clara's was different, methodical, almost serene, her stillness between shots a testament to her training, a quiet grace that captivated the crowd, a grace that spoke of a strength forged in loss. By the fifth station, she noticed the tampering, a Beretta with a heavier trigger pull, a subtle sabotage meant to throw her off, a desperate attempt to ensure her failure. Daniel's words echoed, "Adapt and overcome." She adjusted, her hands steady despite the challenge, matching Victor's score with a precision that drew gasps from the crowd, a precision that spoke of a skill far beyond luck. By the ninth station, their scores were neck and neck, the crowd now cheering for Clara's understated brilliance, her quiet competence a stark contrast to Victor's flamboyant showmanship, a contrast that captivated the audience. Before the 10th station, Victor approached her, his smile a mask over the fear in his eyes, a fear he couldn't hide. "Impressive, Mrs. Bennett. Spector's techniques are unmistakable. I did my research," he said, his voice a low taunt, the use of Daniel's call sign a deliberate jab, a desperate attempt to unsettle her. Clara paused, her heart skipping at the mention of Daniel's name, a wave of grief crashing over her before she pushed it aside, her resolve a shield against the storm. "Then you know he valued honor above all, Mr. Hensley? Something to keep in mind," she said, her voice steady, a quiet rebuke that cut deeper than any shout, a rebuke that reminded him of the integrity he'd forsaken. The final station featured the Barrett M82 at an extreme distance, a challenge designed to favor Victor, a challenge meant to ensure his victory. Clara spotted the tampered scope, the adjustment subtle but deliberate, a final attempt to ensure her failure, a betrayal that cut deeper than any loss. Instead of protesting, she consulted Daniel's notebook, applying his formulas with a precision born of love and loss, a precision that had become her strength. Victor went first, landing 9 of 10 shots in the tightest rings, a near-perfect score that drew applause from his supporters, a testament to his skill, his privilege. "Pressure breaks most people," he said loudly, smirking, his voice carrying across the arena, a taunt meant to undermine her, to remind her of her place. Clara took her position, a profound calm settling over her, a stillness that felt almost sacred, a calm that had once been her lifeline in the face of loss. She adjusted for the sabotage, her shots landing with surgical precision, each crack of the gun a testament to her skill, a testament to the love that had shaped her. By the 7th shot, all bullseyes, the crowd holding its breath as the tension coiled tighter, a storm that threatened to break. A sudden glint of light flashed across her sight, a deliberate distraction from Victor's team, a desperate attempt to throw her off, a betrayal that cut deeper than any loss. She paused, her heart racing, the memory of Daniel's voice grounding her. "Focus, Clara. You're stronger than this." She refocused, her hand steady, and fired her final shot, a perfect bullseye, eclipsing Victor's score, a triumph that echoed through the arena. The arena exploded in applause, a standing ovation echoing through the space, a wave of sound that seemed to lift Clara up, a validation of everything she'd fought for, a validation of the promise she'd kept. Final results. Clara Bennett, 1st place, Victor Hensley, 2nd, Diana announced, her voice ringing with pride, a quiet triumph in her tone, a triumph that mirrored the fire in Clara's heart. Victor's facade shattered, his handshake stiff with rage, his eyes burning with a fury he couldn't contain, a man unhinged by the loss of control. "This isn't over," he hissed, his voice low and venomous, a predator cornered. Clara's response was calm, a quiet strength that belied the storm within, a strength that had become her shield. "For today, it is. And you owe $75,000 to the Heroes Recovery Fund," she said, her voice steady, a reminder of the stakes he'd tried to ignore, a challenge he couldn't escape. Victor's voice rose, his composure gone, his words a desperate attempt to reclaim control, a man grasping at straws. You think this means anything? A widow with a fluke can't replace decades of mastery. This was a stunt. Diana stepped forward, holding up her tablet, her voice cutting through the chaos, a quiet authority in the storm. The equipment was tampered with, Mr. Hensley, but against Ms. Bennett. Security footage shows your team's involvement, she said, her words a revelation, a truth that shattered the illusion Victor had built. The crowd gasped, their admiration for Clara deepening. She'd won despite sabotage, her victory a testament to her skill and resilience, a testament to the strength she'd found in loss. By Monday, videos of Clara's final shot and Victor's outburst had spread like wildfire across the internet, the story of privilege versus perseverance capturing hearts nationwide. A narrative that resonated with anyone who'd ever been underestimated. Clara woke to countless messages from journalists and sponsors, each one a reminder of the spotlight she'd never sought, but she ignored them, her focus on the promise she'd kept, the legacy she'd honored. She called only Ethan, her voice heavy with the weight of the moment, a weight she could no longer ignore. It's bigger than I expected. What now? She asked, her words a quiet plea for guidance, a plea for the peace she'd lost. Ethan's reply was steady, a quiet anchor in the storm. That's up to you, privacy or justice? Clara didn't hesitate, her resolve a fire that refused to be extinguished. Victor hasn't paid, and the tampering was fraud. There must be consequences, she said, her voice a vow, a quiet promise to herself as much as to the world, a promise she'd keep no matter the cost. At Victor's penthouse, his team scrambled to contain the fallout, their voices a chorus of desperation in the face of his unraveling. We issue a statement. Stress, a mistake, a donation, and a retreat, his publicist urged, her words a lifeline, a chance to salvage his reputation. Victor refused, his voice raw with a fury he couldn't contain, a man clinging to the illusion of control. I'm not apologizing. She had military training, that's the unfair advantage, he snapped, his words a desperate attempt to reclaim the narrative, a narrative that had slipped through his fingers. Police arrived shortly after, their presence a quiet storm in the chaos of his world. Victor Hensley, we're investigating fraud and tampering charges related to the competition's wager, they said, their words a reckoning, a truth he couldn't escape. Meanwhile, Clara met with the Heroes Recovery Fund's director, Colonel Edward Lang, a retired Marine whose steady presence reminded her of Daniel. Our board is moving to strip Mr. Hensley of his titles, Lang said, his voice a quiet promise of justice, a promise that echoed the strength she'd found in herself. He then offered Clara a role in a new marksmanship program for veterans, a chance to turn her pain into purpose, a chance to honor Daniel's legacy in a way she'd never imagined. Days later, Victor's legal team settled $150,000 to the fund, double the original amount, a public apology, and a meeting, a final reckoning between two worlds. In a sterile conference room, Victor, now in a plain suit, his usual swagger diminished, spoke, his voice a mix of shame and sincerity, a man humbled by the storm he'd unleashed. Mrs. Bennett, I'm sorry. I've built my life on being the best. When you challenged that, I acted shamefully, criminally. You shoot for something deeper than accolades. It shook me, he said, his words a confession, a rare vulnerability in a man who'd once seemed untouchable. Clara's response was measured, her voice a quiet strength that cut through the tension, a strength that had become her shield. I came to keep a promise to my husband. Your actions dishonor the sport and the charity. I hope you find what truly matters, she said, her words a quiet rebuke, a reminder of the values he'd forsaken, values she'd fought to uphold. Victor nodded, genuine shame crossing his features, a man humbled by the truth he could no longer ignore. That's why I've doubled the donation and accepted a 4-year suspension, he said, his voice a quiet promise, a promise of change she hoped he'd keep. As they parted, he offered a handshake, a gesture of respect that felt like a bridge between their worlds. You're the best I've ever faced. Daniel taught you well, he said, his words a tribute, a recognition of the legacy she carried. Clara shook his hand briefly, her touch steady, her heart heavy with the weight of the moment. He'd say I was already capable. The right teacher just brings it out, she replied, her voice a quiet affirmation, a reminder of the strength she'd found within herself, a strength Daniel had always seen. 3 weeks later, Clara stood at the Heroes Recovery Fund's new training range, funded by Victor's donation, a space of healing that had become her sanctuary. Her first class of veterans listened intently, their faces a mix of hope and scars, a reminder of the battles they'd fought, battles she understood in her own way. I'm Clara Bennett, not a soldier, just someone who learned that the steadiest hands often come from the greatest trials. Let's start with the basics. Stance, breath, focus, she said, her voice stronger than it had been in years, a voice that carried the weight of her journey, a journey that had led her here. She paused, her gaze sweeping over the group, and for a moment, she saw Daniel in their eyes, the same quiet determination, the same unyielding spirit. A veteran named Marcus, his hands scarred from shrapnel, spoke up, his voice rough but steady. I used to shoot before my injury. Thought I'd never hold a gun again. But being here, it's giving me back a piece of myself, he said, his words a quiet testament to the healing power of the program, a testament that brought a lump to Clara's throat, a reminder of why she'd fought so hard. 6 months later, at a veterans fundraiser, Clara addressed the gathering, her voice strong, a voice that carried the weight of her journey, a journey that had become a movement. A year ago, I walked into a range to keep a promise to my late husband. I thought I'd reconnect with a skill, then fade back into my life. Instead, I found myself in a battle that led to this program. A community of healing, she said, her words a quiet tribute, a tribute to the man who'd taught her to stand tall. The crowd applauded as the fund announced the Daniel Spector Bennett Marksmanship Scholarship, a legacy that would live on in the veterans it supported. Clara touched her ring one last time, the silver cool against her skin, whispering to herself, "This is for you, Daniel, for showing me how to stand tall," her voice a quiet prayer, a final farewell to the man who'd shaped her into the woman she was today. Clara's true victory wasn't just beating a champion who underestimated her. It was rediscovering her strength, honoring her past, while forging a future of purpose, a future that carried Daniel's legacy into the light. Her journey teaches us a profound lesson. Never overlook the quiet ones, for behind their stillness lies resilience, skill, and a fire forged in life's hardest moments, a fire that can change the world. Reflect on a time you were underestimated. How did you rise above it? Share your story in the comments. Let's inspire each other with the strength we've found in our own battles. And if Clara's journey moved you, subscribe to Daily Narrated Stories. We're bringing you life-changing tales like this every week, stories that remind us of the power within us all. But we need your support to keep going, to share more stories of resilience and hope. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now and join our community of storytellers, a community that believes in the power of stories to change lives, a community waiting for you to be a part of its journey.